afternoon, good evening, and good morning, depending on where you're joining this webinar. Welcome to LMU's special panel discussion on global marketing. My name is Young-Sun Park. I'm a professor of international business and management at Loyola Marymount University in Los Angeles, California. I'm also director of the Center for International Business Education and the Center for Asian Business. Today's program is funded by side grants awarded by the U.S. Department of Education, as well as a gift provided by the D.K. Kim Foundation. D.K. Kim Foundation has been a gracious benefactor of the Center for Asian Business for past 8 years to promote better understanding of important issues involving the U.S. and Asian countries. LMU is one of 16 universities in the country that has received the prestigious cyber grants. The LMU CIBE serves as regional as well as national resources for our students, faculty, and business community through international business education, foreign language training, and research capacities. As part of our mission to help improve global competitiveness of the U.S. businesses, LMU CIBE has been offering special lecture series and webinars on various topics of international business, such as global marketing, global supply chain, and global talent management. Today's webinar topic covers a very timely and important marketing opportunities and challenges facing Asian companies who are eager to expand their businesses into the U.S. market. The U.S. represents a major export market for many Asian countries, such as China, Japan, South Korea, and India. In fact, they occupy almost half of the top 10 trading partner list for the U.S. Our panelists will discuss how Asian countries will leverage their global or local brands in entering the U.S. market through effective brand positioning. They'll also explore how U.S. companies can tap into new business opportunities in Asia. So this particular webinar will explore marketing strategies and practices that will mutually benefit the U.S. and Asian companies and economies. Now I'd like to introduce our moderators who will lead the discussion with our panelists today. First, Dr. Andrew Rom is a professor of marketing and co-director of LMU's transformative M-School program, which helps to build future leaders in the creative marketing industry. He teaches courses in adaptive media and analytics, and his research examines consumer usage and acceptance of new media, such as mobile and social media marketing. And next, Professor Matt Stiefel is a strategist with over 20 years of experience in the creative marketing industry. He joined LMU as a full-time clinical faculty member 11 years ago to build and lead M-School program together with Professor Wong. Before joining LMU, he served as executive vice president and director of strategic planning at LA-based Daily Advertising. He also worked with the world-class advertising agencies such as global companies such as Google, Toyota, Nestle, and Bank of America, to name a few. Andy and Matt, I'd like to turn the program over to you. Would you please introduce our panelists and start discussion with them? I know you guys have prepared the great questions. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Professor Peck. And everyone, welcome to our Global Marketing webinar sponsored by LMU's Center for International Business Education. The theme of today's webinar is Brands Beyond Borders, Marketing Strategies for U.S. and Asia Business Success. Hi, everyone. I'm Andy Rome. I'm here with my colleague, Matt Stuffel. We're faculty in the Marketing and Business Law Department at LMU, and we co-direct the LMU's M-School program.
Special thanks to our CBA leadership team, including Associate Dean Josh Spisman and Dean Dale Smith, along with Young-Sun Peck and Jennifer Tyler, for the opportunity to bring together such amazing panelists and talk about unlocking new markets and opportunities as it relates to global marketing.
And special thanks to all of you for attending today's webinar, including our undergraduate and graduate faculty, staff, students, and of course, any of our M-Schoolers in the house in attendance in this webinar, and as well as our industry friends and partners.
So in putting together today's program with a truly amazing panel representing a diverse set of perspectives and experiences, We were inspired by the question, what does it mean to be a global brand today in the year 2025? And here's a fun fact. A recent survey highlighted that the cumulative value of the top 100 global brands rose almost 6%. And another study showed that global brands are viewed by consumers as possessing the power to make the world a better place. So being a global brand brings great opportunity and room for growth.
So now let's introduce our four magnificent panelists. First, Professor Ingrid Greene teaches business ethics and sustainability and is the academic director for the Master in Global Entrepreneurial Management program at LMU, whose partner schools include IQS School of Management in Barcelona, Spain, and Fujian Catholic University in Taipei City, Taiwan. In her prior academic work, she taught organizational behavior at Pepperdine University and communications at Compton College.
I believe it's Barcelona. Up next are Celine Chai, Bryant Lin, co-founders of Gen Z agency 98. Celine, Gia, and Brian are 2020 LMU graduates and former Star M School students. And right after graduating, they founded the agency called 98, named after the year they were born, 1998, to be a future-focused global creative agency that creates collaborative relationships between Gen Z and global brands. And I gotta be honest, it's so cool to see you guys 5 years later, still doing this. You have sort of beat the small business odds. So kudos on that.
And during the webinar, we'll shift between slides and the discussion with the panelists, and the slides will simply help keep us on track with our discussion. But we thought we'd start off with a little pop quiz.
Yeah. So our pop quiz is which Asian countries have the highest number of what are called FOEs, foreign-owned enterprises that are doing business in California. So which foreign businesses have a presence in California? And then put your answers, put the country names of the Asian country names in the Q&A chat. And let's see if we can get all of them. Let's see, do we have yeah, here's a Q&A. Sophie says Japan, China, and Korea. Solid start. Nina, China, Japan, Korea. Taiwan, new entrant. Tom, Korea, Taiwan, yes. What's another really big Asian country?
Anonymous attendee. China and Japan.
Oh. Let's
Tom,
see.
Smarty Pants Bielek.
All right. Oh, Ursa. Okay. All right. Should we reveal?
Let's reveal.
Let's go. So just closing some windows. Here is the list. So number one of the Asian countries and number two is Japan. Second on the Asian country list is China. Tied for third is Taiwan and South Korea, very, very neck and neck. Singapore, and then India. And then Professor Rum, you had some observations.
Yeah, I mean, Japan is far and beyond the leading Asia country. And it's really interesting to look at the comparison between the United Kingdom with basically the same number of jobs, but with almost 1.5 times the number of
establishments.
employees.
Yeah.
So, kind of interesting.
Awesome. Okay, great job, everybody. Everyone named Asian countries, which was a great start. No one named a non-Asian country. So
like Denmark.
So there's some reasons why bridging opportunities between the US and Asian markets is important. And first is to create jobs that promote innovation and improve competitiveness.
Second reason would be to provide access to large, massive, and growing markets.
Third is to enhance economic diversification.
Fourth reason is to spark innovation and collaboration.
And finally, to gain access to resources and talent. So let's jump to our first question. And I think maybe we'll start with Ingrid on this one, and then we'll go to the 98 folks. So what does it mean to be a global brand today? We're trying to manage and control your brand by putting your stamp of approval on every campaign can be inefficient or ineffective. Meaning, from a global brand standpoint, should you let the markets run free, or should you try to manage it with an iron fist?
Right. Yeah, it's great to see everyone on here, and super exciting topic to discuss today. I think that this has really evolved. You know, when I graduated business school in 2003, there was much more of an iron fist feeling that you know, that the global brand needed to be the same in every single region. And now, as we've seen social media develop, and you know, now eventually, you know, ChatGPT and AI, this customized experience is really the key. And so it's really flipped that iron hand on its head. And that we've seen brands that succeed, they really do customize. And, you know, for an example is, you know, Starbucks. You might think, oh yeah, Starbucks is the same. It's the same logo in every country, and it has the same colors, and you know, it's so similar, but it's not. You know, when you go inside, the menu is always just a little bit different, right? When you go to Asia, you see matcha. When you go to Denmark, you see a lot more cocoa, things like this. So, yeah, so it's definitely customizing is the direction. And for better or for worse, it makes it harder for a marketing team, you know, because they really have to pay attention to each individual market. Yeah, and so that's kind of my 2 cents, is that you know, it's been harder to control the you know, the brand by putting their stamp of approval, but it's the way things are going and the way things are headed. And thank goodness for ChatGPT and AI, that'll take a little bit of the load off in coming years. But definitely, I'd say, you know, localizing to the individual markets is the trend.
And from a 98 standpoint, we should have asked this in the so-called green room, but have you guys picked questions, or can we just kind of shoot from the hip here? How would you prefer to do this?
Shoot from the hip, and
Yep.
then we need a redirect, we will.
Great. Celine was the first one to speak. Celine.
Hi, thank you for having us. Yeah, I think being a global brand today comes with like different levels of complexity. I think there's a lot of emphasis on localization just because we want to make sure we fit into, you know, the cultural norms of different things, but there is an ability to control your brand from a very global and efficient way. I think that comes a lot with branding. Just making sure that you have this overarching yeah, like brand structure, brand positioning, that should be really, really clear. And just an efficient way to manage a global brand. But yeah, I think having a stamp of approval for local markets is also really important, just because trends and language and changes and all of that happens on a cultural level, whether that's the internet, whether that's just a geographic location. So it's really important to do sort of that last check, that stamp of approval for every campaign.
And then Celine, you are a truly global citizen.
I am.
Where are you? I mean, I feel like every time we talk, you're somewhere else. Where's Celine? Where in the world is Celine Chai today?
Celine is in LA right now, but Celine has also lived in 5 countries, 7 cities now. So I've had my fair share in the last 26 years of living.
That's awesome. How about Brian? What's your thoughts on this question?
Yeah, very similar to Celine. I think when we work with brands, a lot of what we emphasize is like making sure that the brand values and just that kind of ideology is really solid for the brands themselves, which creates a very like kind of like strong like core brand. And then as they kind of go into other countries, try to adapt to different cultures, having that structure really helps both like solidify the brand as like a very strong unifying force, but also very much like customized to the local tastes. So that's definitely something that we really like to emphasize with working with our clients.
And Brian, we were chatting before this. You guys you've acquired a new client. Congratulations. And it's how has sort of foreign culture played into your relationship with them?
Yeah, so we've recently just helped launch Pingu on social media. So if you guys don't know, that's like a little claymation penguin who's a little bit bratty, a little bit sassy. But yeah, they are now under Mattel, so we're working with them. And Pingu has already had a very strong physical presence in Asia, specifically Japan and Korea. And yeah, the way that they control that brand is very much through that kind of strong brand structure of having like a very strong like tone and imagery and values, and then kind of customizing it for different markets. So we really see that play out um, in very unique ways for each country. And each one is very much customized to the local tastes. And they found success in kind of every format for that.
Very cool. Gia, how about you? Are you in lockstep with your company founders, or are you a dissenter on this one? Do you see things differently?
No, totally agree. I mean, when you think about brand comms today, really it's all about digital and social media. Like there's not a single brand that is doing well that is not on social. And the way that socials work is, it's incredibly fast paced and there's only so much control you can have. At the end of the day, what you post out there, it's gonna be remixed by, a DJ, and then this creator is gonna create a meme out of it. And once it's out there, you can't really control what's going to happen. So yeah, as a big global brand, there's only so much control you can have. At the end of the day, you kind of have to trust in your consumer and your audience to take the brand wherever they want to take it and roll with it. And we're seeing that the brands that are the most successful are the ones that really know how to leverage social listening and empower what people create of the brand as opposed to the brand's own view of the brand, if that makes sense.
It does make sense.
Thank you. Thinking of the topic of, what does it mean to be a global brand today, and whether like global strategies or more local strategies make sense. And this is a follow-up question for all four of our panelists. Does the idea, I keep thinking of universal appeals, like music is, there are different types of music. Music is a global appeal. Sports is a global appeal. Maybe cute penguins is a universally, appealing asset. Do you think that this concept of universal appeals plays into how brands either execute like really purely local strategies, or does universal appeals play into maybe more of a global strategy with nuances within music or animals or other universal things?
Start with Brian.
Yeah, I think we see universal appeal as kind of a overarching like brand value, and then kind of it lives out different ways depending on the local markets. So whether that be in sports or even just like attitudes, tones, and voices, I think a lot of things kind of transcend language. So there's always that kind of universal appeal for that. But I think kind of bringing it back within to context of a local market is definitely where the challenge lies.
Great, thank you, Brian. Ingrid, any thoughts on that, or?
Right. As you were speaking, when we talk about universal appeal, Red Bull really comes to mind. That, not many people know that Red Bull was started in Austria and still is a privately owned Austrian company. And he chose the name Red Bull because it's universally appealing, that those are two words that would be recognized around the world. Definitely not a German name for sure. And then the colors, the red and the blue. And then these extreme sports again. So yeah, so I definitely think that, when they choose the product or they choose the identity, the marketing identity of the product, that there is a lot of value to choosing something that will be appealing universally. Definitely.
Great, thank you.
Do y'all think that does like a truly universal global brand, does that exist? Is that possible?
Like Coca-Cola?
Sure.
I mean, the brand, yes, I'll jump in with Coca-Cola only because the brand is universal, but right, there are like over 100 recipes for Coca-Cola, right? So there are different products. So I guess, yeah, if we're talking about brand, yes, but if we're talking about product, then no.
Right.
And we are fully into audience participation. So
Yeah.
any, webinar guests, attendees, if you have questions or if you have certain perspectives, definitely throw them into the Q&A window. And
Well, I actually have an audience participation question. Put in the chat, how many miles apart are Professor Rome and Professor Steffel right now? What is the mile distance
could be
between them?
in different countries.
Yeah, how far apart are we from one another? Put a number in the Q&A chat. Booker 0.1. It's very close.
0.
Oh, we've got 5,000. Gabby is so some definite suspicion. We are indeed literally sitting at the same table. Okay. Ursa, close.
0.6 inches.
Terrific. Yes, 0.6 feet.
I want to know whose kitchen you're in, though.
This
Are you
is my kitchen.
Okay, got it. Okay, good to know. Okay, great.
Okay, let's go back to we're going to switch gears and we're going to talk about market entry strategies. And so we're going to talk about this in two sides of the coin. And the first side of the coin is, what are the key considerations that US companies must assess to do business in Asia? And then we'll talk about the other side in a minute. We'll talk about what do Asian companies need to consider when they come to the US. Celine, what do you think?
Yeah, I think to what we were talking about earlier, I think there's a lot of adaptation that happens when entering a specific market. Let's use Pingu for example. It's originally from the UK, but it gained popularity in Japan, Korea, China. And I think the teenagers who interact with Pingu on the day-to-day in Japan, China, and Korea are very, very different from the Gen Zs, say, here in the US. And not only just in the US, like each state has a very different interest and pastime hobby demographic. So even though like on paper, people are like the same age or maybe the same ethnicity, we're dealing with very, very different subsets of interests. And I think the world we surround ourselves in really makes influences on a different like micro and macro level. As an agency, I think one of the perks that we have is that we have a very close tie to North American Gen Z culture. And so we've found that we've been able to adapt some of the foundations from these brands that have success in other countries and bring it to North America because we are so familiar with the internet strategies here and what, teens or Gen Zs in general are interested in, and just really being able to tap into those nuances has really been helpful in helping brands succeed here.
Awesome. I have a question for Gia. Gia, same question to you, but I have a second question that just occurred to me is, people are starting to talk about Gen Alpha. And I would say like the level of conversation between it was like Gen Z was at a fever pitch and now it's slowly switching. So my second totally unrelated but out of curiosity question is, how is 98 thinking about youth? Are you a youth marketing agency? Are you a Gen Z agency? How are you guys thinking about this shifting demographic?
Oh my God, Steffel, coming in with $1 million questions. Right now, me, Celine, and Brian are all split on that. We haven't yet decided where we're gonna go positioning wise for the agency in the future. Right now we're sticking to Gen Z though, keeping a close eye on Alpha and just making sure we're constantly on the pulse with younger Gen Zs. Because at the end of the day, Gen Alpha is always going to be heavily influenced by Gen Z, and so it is very much transferable knowledge from Z to A. But to this question,
All right, that was a total hot seat question.
to this question, doing business in Asia is so different, I think, than the US. Like work culture, from the apps that you use and how people communicate. You definitely, I think, need a local team who understands. It's very much like a people connections type of thing. And if you're an outsider in the US trying to come in cold, it's really difficult without like partnering with maybe a local organization or a brand in the same industry that you can collaborate with, um, who really just understands the space, has all the local connections, and knows what they're doing. Like they already have a captured market that you're looking for. So yeah, I think it's knowing how Asian businesses run and adapting to that rather than doing a copy paste strategy with how you run your own business.
Yeah, I've even experience working with Japanese automakers, and they have their American team, but for like big campaigns, you have to run the ideas up the flagpole to Japanese leadership, and the way that decisions are made, and even the way that feedback is given, and reading like between the lines, like everyone's very polite, and so they won't like give you the critique right away, and so you're like, there's just definitely a different business culture. Ingrid, any thoughts on US companies?
Yeah, for sure. I think, Gia, you're right on track. Just so important to do your due diligence and understand the culture and really, I think that's like my biggest passion in life is like, that people really need to understand how people work across borders. Not everybody is going to make decisions the same, have the same habits, etc. And so, yeah, when entering a new country, the due diligence is just so important. I'd say, for a market entry strategy, a big piece to think about is like, how does the brand want to enter the market, right? Do they want to partner with an existing organization? Do they want to go in as a fully owned subsidiary? Do they want a license, right? And so that will take months and maybe even years to research and decide. And then again, if they partner, who are they going to partner with, et cetera. And so, yeah, I can't stress enough the importance of doing your homework. And just to come back with another example, how Uber just, failed, and miserably when it went into China. They kind of went in bull in a China shop and they thought that they could do this on their own. They don't have to partner with what Didi was the existing taxi company. And they thought that they could fight the regulations like they did in France and other places and in San Francisco. But it didn't work. And now Uber is no longer in China. I mean, they have like a 20% stake in Didi, but so did they really truly fail? Maybe not. But yeah, it's a pity that they're not there underneath their own brand because they really didn't do their due diligence. And as Gio was just saying, they didn't really understand what it meant to work in Asia, for sure.
I thought the bull in a China shop was funny.
Thank you, pun intended, right?
Yeah.
Exactly, thanks.
That was a good one. I had a question to all four of our panelists, and that is Asia is a big market. Have you come across, or can you imagine companies that make the mistake of looking at or viewing the Asian market as one big homogeneous, undifferentiated market, or are companies smarter than that? Like, I'm thinking of the 98 folks. You probably have worked with clients or prospective clients that, are looking at Asia and they look to you as maybe their foot in the door, or at least a way to understand better the, Asian culture. But it's not one flavor of Asian culture. Have you come across companies that have made that mistake or have viewed it like that?
Brian, you were
Yeah,
like you were on the verge.
go for it.
I think, yeah, in terms of the brands that we've worked with, definitely kind of that pan-Asian approach is very much a rarity. I think when brands like, for the most part, are looking towards Asia, they're looking at specific countries, which makes it a little bit easier to kind of narrow down and work with. But I think for US-based businesses, that's still a potential concern, especially as they look towards Asia. So I think definitely getting more awareness of kind of how Asian countries differ or are unique in different ways is definitely vital to expanding and doing business over in Asia. And I think also LMU does a very good job of kind of educating us on those differences. So shout out to you guys.
Awesome. Ingrid.
Yeah, that's good to hear. I'm glad to hear that LMU educates you guys on that. I hope so, right? Because definitely, going into China is definitely different from going into Vietnam or Malaysia and Korea. Um, you know, I always love to give the example that, 70 years ago, Korea and Ghana had the same GDP, right? And so amazing how Korea has just moved forward so quickly and so fast. That was due to, post-Korean War and the American the support of Korea not to move into communism. I'm talking about South Korea, of course. And so it's really, developed so nicely and so quickly. And so we don't really consider Korea much of a developing nation anymore. But that's so different to go into Vietnam or Thailand still and much of China. And so Japan, of course, right, super developed. So yeah, I'm just, also a big fan of just making sure we recognize people's differences and really parlay into, what people are interested in and meet them where they're at.
Awesome. Thank you. We have a question from Professor Francisco. And the question in the chat is, what is the importance of applying the concepts of the experience economy and the transformation economy domestically and globally? And how do these concepts affect global branding? Who wants to take a stab
That's
at
a
that one?
tough one.
Yeah.
Right.
The experience economy. I'm thinking, isn't that Joseph? That's Joseph Pine's thing. Joseph Pine talks about the experience economy, that we've moved from raw materials to goods to services and now to experiences. Like Disneyland would be part of the experience economy. Starbucks has elevated into the experience economy. How do you think that maybe I'll take a stab at interpreting the question is, how are we using brand experience to participate in other cultures, to experience other cultures? Can you guys think of any ways that people are like getting little snippets? I mean, I think of K-pop in some ways is like so it's largely an experience economy where we get a sample of another culture, but I'll open it up to you.
Yeah. I'll let the students go, the alums go, because I feel like I've been talking a lot, so let them jump into that. Yeah, and you guys, I think you can talk about any piece of that. Like, what do you think maybe the experience economy or the transformation economy?
Yeah, I think for the experience economy, definitely we're seeing a lot of that kind of play out both in the US and Asia. I think pop-up culture is really big in both areas. And people, just like globally, people love a good kind of in-person experience. So being able to provide that is definitely vital for businesses to grow and expand, especially in just creating like a physical presence within a country. So definitely important. And then in terms of the transformation economy, I think that's definitely a little bit rarer. I think that's always something that brands kind of globally strive for in terms of just kind of changing the behaviors and the practices. So it's definitely kind of that ideal, but I think realistically, seeing like just like market entry, like it's still very much a kind of tough concept to manage.
Thanks, Francisco, for the question. Let's shift to talk about cultural adaptation, and I'm gonna earmark a question for later, which is about managing social media in different countries. But let's think now about sort of culture. Is it becoming more complex to manage brands at a local level? And how do you maintain your brand voice yet connect with local culture and language? And let's save the social media question just for a little bit. But like, yeah, how do you like how local is local for like how do you think about local culture? Let's go
Should we
with
start with the 98
yeah.
team?
Let's go, Celine.
I feel like you can get as local as you want. But in the instances of sort of like how we manage a lot of brands, it's kind of per region. So I would say like North America is its own region, but I feel like a lot of the marketing, excuse me, a lot of the marketing like creatives and just influences come from big cities. So I don't know how much of a representation of North America that really is, but that's kind of where like the cultural influences come from. But I think you can get even nitty-gritty to an extreme local level. You could focus on Los Angeles and not even just LA, but like West Side LA, for example, if you wanted to do what Bryant was suggesting, like pop-ups to appeal to, you know, an even more niche market. I think there's value in both. I think there's value in targeting a very small group of folks, but knowing that you're going to capture, you know, 80 to 90% of them. And there's also a lot of value in sort of casting a wider net, something that's a little bit more general, but still true to the region or country as a whole. But also knowing that you may miss a good chunk of people just because it didn't relate or resonate with them. So I think there is a fine balance. I think if a brand had all the budget in the world, they do everything and all, but that definitely isn't always the case.
Celine and the others, do brands risk brand confusion by doing this, or does it actually lead to a more authentic brand when you're adapting to local sensibilities, local culture, local flavors, local tastes versus trying to be one brand for all parts of the world?
I mean, I think it all starts with foundation. When I think of like successful global brands, like the first one that comes to mind for me is Nike. I think everyone around the world understands who and what Nike is. That like orange check mark symbolizes the same thing across everywhere, but maybe the athletes they feature, maybe the sports they feature, or types of sports like attire that is needed. For example, Malaysia, where I'm from, is predominantly Muslim. So, Nike will then be selling more, modest workout attire or hijabs as part of their sports collection. And that may not be something that's like commonly found in other places. So I think there's really important nuances to capture as a brand on a local level, but it all starts with the same foundation. Like, is our brand the same across everywhere we go, and how do we differentiate and nicheify it to where we are at?
Yeah, Nike is a great example, and also what Ingrid mentioned, Starbucks. I mean, Starbucks has, I think, a brand meaning that transcends countries, markets, cultures. But as Professor Greene said, there are these adaptations at the local, at the menu level, and maybe in store atmospherics that kind of tie Starbucks to that more local, culture.
Mm-hmm. I think you could even like, I was just thinking about, I think there's geography, but then there's even like audience, like targeting Gen Z or Gen Alpha. That feels, that has its own language. I was thinking originally about even language, like maybe for the 98 folks. Have you done any campaigns in the US that aren't English as a first language, where you've you've transcreated into other, like, I'm just thinking about Los Angeles. I can't remember the number, but there's like thousands of languages spoken. I might be overshooting that number, but many, many, many languages. How do you guys think about acculturation versus unacculturation in different languages, or is it pretty much sort of English as a first language for you?
It's pretty much English as a first language for the campaigns that we run in the US. The only time we consider like transcribing to other languages is if we're actually targeting different countries. So, for example, one of our clients is Paul Frank, and they are currently Australia based and entering the US market. Their second largest market is Thailand. So a lot of our content is like shifted also to be targeted towards Paul Frank Thailand. But in the US, it's mainly English first.
Mhm. I was thinking about, I've done some work in public service, and also in automotive. I think sometimes when you're trying to reach certain audience, Toyota, they have a Asian American agency, they have a African American agency, they've got a Latino agency, and they come up with an overarching positioning for a brand, and then they'll speak to those communities in different ways. The way that an African American man relates to his Camry is different than an Asian American man, and sort of what a car means to them. But it's really tricky to come up with a unified brand image, because at the same time, a lot of these people are sharing the same media, which I think is just which goes back to our original question of like, how do we know, or how would you advise a client on how to be specific enough, but then not too specific? Like, how do we go about sort of finding that right amount of specificity, that right amount of targeting, that right amount of messaging? How do you know if it's too sharp or too broad? Do you guys have any thoughts?
It's definitely a balance. I think if you're always trying to go broad and shoot for virality, it'll end up being too broad and you'll fall flat. So I think the hardest part is really knowing who your audience is and who you want to expand to, like what specific audience you want to expand to, because now with social media and targeting, you kind of have access to anyone. So really nailing down the highest potential like customer for your brand is the hardest part, and then speaking to them in very different ways that is like niche and kind of like, oh my God, how do they know that about me? Did they listen to my conversation? You kind of want to be doing both, like both, viral attention seeking content, but also like niche, personal, individualized content as well.
So, Brian.
Yeah, I guess to add on to that, really loved your point about Steffel, about the kind of the ways that different, I guess the same product means or is used kind of differently by different cultures. But yeah, I think that really speaks to kind of the importance of research in trying to find that kind of balance point of making sure that it's like both broad enough to appeal to a large audience, and then also specific enough that it relates to the consumer. And yeah, I think that's definitely kind of why research is very important in that sense of really almost like bringing out a universal appeal or universal truth within a specific kind of demographic. And yeah, being very clear on what that target demographic is so that you can pull those insights, and that universal appeal is vital for kind of the success of a campaign.
A follow-up question to that is, I know that 98, you pride yourself on your the research that you conduct, and you've got a panel of folks called the Koi Pond. Can you talk a little bit about some of the things, like what's your process for getting to whatever your version of the truth is for a client? Like where do you go looking for information?
We just talk to Gen Z. Like we talk to them all the time and about like so many different things. Like the latest survey we're running is about the male loneliness epidemic, and kind of getting the male perspective in this like hyper feminist social media landscape. So it's about just like leveling with Gen Z, like talking to each one of them and just getting to know them. It is a community, so we do uh try to get to know each person within the koi pond. And we always tell clients, like, if you're trying to just target Gen Z, like, you're not gonna appeal to anyone. Like, who actually within Gen Z do you want to reach? And just talk to them.
So you're not all the same? Have I been going about this wrong this entire time? Let's talk about, we were talking about, I preface social media. There was a trend, and maybe it's still the case, that for social media, some brands opt to have a global social media handle and they run it in English, and others have the French version, or they have the Chinese version, or whatever it is. How would you think about sort of which one is the right one to use, and is it always one, or under which conditions? Like, what are the challenges around managing social media at a global scale?
Ingrid, any thoughts on, to start with you?
Sure. Yeah. I was just talking about this with one of my master's students in the MGEM program, because she's from Barcelona, and she is an influencer there. She doesn't have, she has like 5,000 followers, which isn't a ton, but because she speaks in Catalan, those followers are really loyal, super dedicated. And so she's now at the stage where she's like, wow, like she'd like to grow her audience, but that means maybe speaking more in English, getting a wider audience. And so she's going to work on her business plan this summer, actually, as part of her master's program, to do some research and find out what her options are. Also talk about like what type of products she wants to offer, and that'll all go into the mix. But yeah, I think it's not an easy decision to make, for sure. My dad is from Switzerland, and I grew up a good portion of my life there, and that is the everyday occurrence, right? Where we have 4 languages in Switzerland, right? English, well, not English, French, German, Italian, and then a couple hundred people speak a version of Latin called Romansh. And so any type of advertising, any type of product, always has to debate whether they, do it in one language or another, or English. And so, yeah, I think just, yeah, it's a research thing. It depends on the product, it depends on the circumstance, it depends on the time, it depends on the message. It really, as Gia was saying, it's about doing research and finding out who's going to buy your product, and, what language are they speaking.
Yeah, 98. What's your hot take on country specific social media presence or global social media, or maybe either, and it depends. Let's start with Celine.
That's a good question. I mean, like for some of our brands that are more global, I'm thinking about Pingu in specific, just because that's the most relevant one. They have a Pingu Japan account on socials, and then we're running North America as the primary target, but we're still, like, if we're looking at the audience and the viewership of our content, it's still a mixture of folks from around the world. If you look at the Japan account, it's very much localized. So they're talking about their cafe pop-ups, and their humor is very, very different. We also made gifts for them, and we had some of the gifts had text on the gifts already, and I think one of them was just like, yay, 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 yay. And the Korea team had asked us to send them the asset without the text on screen, and they were going to translate it to, you know, a version of laughter or like joy in Korean. So I think like a lot of the content can be repurposed in ways that fit your specific market. I think it's important to do that due diligence in order to connect with people on the same piece of content can work in so many different ways. We just have to make sure it fits the audience, and that's done with research and understanding of culture and language.
Remember, I read it. There was a study, I think by IPA, and they looked at the effectiveness of ad campaign. It was ads. It was actually effectiveness of commercials, and it was commercials with a voiceover, commercials with text, or commercials with no voice and no text, just story. And the commercials with just story actually performed the best. And it occurs to me, even thinking about that, like how flexible that could be. It's like the IKEA catalog or the IKEA manual. It can just like go into any shipper and then work anywhere. I'm surprised we don't have more brands that are creating global content that sort of speaks to the human condition. Again, I think going back to Nike, they have a great example of that. Brian, what do you think? Local social media or mono handle?
I think it depends really. I think for the most part, just having kind of that one global account works well enough, especially for small brands. But I think going the extra mile is definitely worth it, but only if you do it well. I think looking at some of like the biggest brands out there, or I guess looking at some of the biggest creators out there, like I'm thinking like Mr. Beast has like 67 channels and like all in different languages. And he's able to kind of reach a much larger global audience, and each one kind of brings in kind of different viewers. But he obviously has like a very big team, spends a lot of effort in kind of developing that type of content. I think for the most part, like if you aren't able to do it well, then it becomes almost kind of a detriment to you. And that it's like too logistically tough to handle. And it kind of devalues your brand a little bit if you aren't able to do it well. So I think for the most part, for most brands, just having that singular global presence is good enough. But spending that effort and going that extra mile really shows towards those consumers that you really care and are really trying to reach them.
Yeah, I think it's a great point.
On top of the, there are cultural differences, messaging differences. Do you guys think that maybe there are platform differences? Like TikTok means something in one part of the world versus another part. Instagram means something else. X means something else. Does that add to the complexity of what we're talking about? Or do you view like the top 3 social media platforms as really having the same effect or meaning no matter where you are in the world?
I think platform makes all the difference. So Gia actually just got to the US like a week ago, something like that. And one of the things she noticed was how many ads there are on TikTok. And I have that jarring experience too. I've traveled so many places and I have never seen so many TikTok ads in my life. So I feel like there is that creator economy focus and TikTok shop and TikTok as like a marketing, like a paid marketing platform here in the US that doesn't necessarily apply everywhere else. And yeah, like, there was chats about Red Note coming or being a popular thing for here for a moment, and it's been around in China for so long. And so I think platform definitely does make a difference, and even just like the same platforms and how people use it is so vastly challenging.
So you're saying that your TikTok experience out of the country is different than your TikTok experience in?
Extremely. In Malaysia, I get so many more lives. People love to do lives, and that's how like people sell stuff. I think people here like to do lives too, but it's definitely not as much, and I don't get nearly as many sponsored or ad posts as I do here.
Interesting. Huh. We I think, Bryant, you mentioned creators, creators, influencers, Mr. Beast. Um, how has the creator economy influenced brands in different markets? And sort of even thinking about your role as agency and your sort of creators, and then maybe you're managing relationships with other creators, and you're dealing with a multinational brand that has, like, how do you start thinking about incorporating other people and the stuff that they make into your communications?
Yeah, creators are super cool, super revolutionary, I feel like, for in terms of just reaching different markets. Like, it's such a great entry point for a brand to partner with a creator, because they've already kind of done a lot of the work that the brands are looking for. So they have that kind of cultural expertise, and they're like already pretty reputable in the market, and they've captured part of that audience that a brand wants to also capture. So I think partnering with creators is definitely a very um, easy and, yeah, just kind of transformational way of entering and appealing to new audiences and new economies. So yeah, being able to kind of co-create with them, and yeah, basically generate this like vision of what the brand looks like within the local economy is definitely something new, and definitely a big opportunity for brands to kind of establish themselves um, as both like a reputable and likable brand.
So let's pretend I'm an Asian brand and I'm looking to enter the US market. And maybe I'm looking at, I've influencers, or I want to use, apply influencers in the US. Would it be stupid, or would it be smart to look at LA, Los Angeles, or maybe even the Southern California market as a validation market or validation first entry point for entering the US? Like, is SoCal diverse enough? Does it represent enough, diversity in terms of demographics or cultures that you might look at Southern California as that first step to validating my brand or my brand's appeal? Gia, what do you think? Like, is that smart or is that stupid?
I think it depends on your brand and what the product is. Like, does it make sense for the SoCal market? Like, if it's in the health and wellness space, fashion, um, probably, yes, a good place to start. It is very saturated though, so you'll need a lot of initial investment to like stand out and stand a chance at competing against others in the market. So, yeah, if you want to go big,
Mhm.
and if it makes sense for the product, it's a good place to be.
Yeah.
But
If we
yeah,
could
there's
make it,
other
we make it
options.
in Southern California, we could make it in Kansas or the East Coast, like, using Southern California as a jumping off point. I don't know, just the fact that, like, culture is seems to be a common theme tonight, demographics, like the differences that are across the world. I think a lot of those differences are here, in our doorstep.
It's like a global microcosm
Mhm.
just right here. Also, what, the fifth biggest economy, California?
Like, yeah, world's fifth or big. Ingrid,
Yeah, I was gonna say, I agree with you guys. Yeah, that I think Los Angeles is a big, very diverse market, or Southern California. And so I would definitely think that it would be a good validation market, because we have, yeah, people from all over. I know 12 million people just in Los Angeles, lots of different languages.
Mhm.
Yeah, and to test a product, to do it in a smaller geographic location is always, helpful, just from cost and transportation issues. So yeah, I think LA could be a really great place to validate and test ideas.
Quick time check. We're
Yeah, I think
running up on 6 o'clock.
I would love to know. I think this question about positioning. I think maybe this first part is, where's the white space? What are other countries doing that we're not and could be, or what are we doing that other countries could be like, where's the opportunity or the white space where we can learn from others? What do y'all think? Gia.
Did you want to share this?
So I spent a pretty decent portion of last year doing a whole like digital nomad stint in Europe. And so I was in Portugal, I visited France and Germany, and just kind of seeing what's going on there, because usually I'm in Asia or in LA, the US. And just looking at, what's happening on social media, what we're seeing with the koi pond, we're seeing this huge like fatigue with social media and being online and going from screen to screen to screen, phone to laptop to TV, and just that rotation again and again. And what we're seeing is that third spaces, like real life IRL third spaces, is kind of the white space now for brands. And the brands that are getting people together in real life and facilitating that connection and community and experience among like their audience and just consumers on like a local scale are the ones that are really providing the most value to consumers right now, at least to Gen Z. So like one of the experiences that I did when I was in Europe, I discovered this app called Time Left, and it basically connects you with four other strangers in whatever city you're traveling in for like an intimate dinner. And yeah, it just facilitates that connection, and they do it everywhere in Asia and Europe. I think they're starting to do it now in the US. And
I've gone on one.
oh yeah.
Yeah, it was great. It was like a super interesting, terrible name though. Time Left. It sounds like you're dying. Why is it called that? Do you know?
I don't know actually. I never really thought about that, but yeah, like Hinge was doing a huge like campaign. I think they called it One More Hour, where they really started investing in sponsoring meetups, like group meetups, and there was a whole run club phenomenon where everyone was starting to get off the dating apps and find connections and like run clubs. And so yeah, I think that is a huge opportunity right now for brands.
Giving me more faith in humanity. People are actually getting together. That's good.
Yeah. Any other white spaces? I think just this is so interesting. Celine?
I feel like it's kind of done here, but I think it's done better in Asia is a lot of the pop-up like brick and mortar spaces. I think there's like a creative vision that just like doesn't end in that part of the world. I see the way like brands, whether it's a luxury brand like Louis Vuitton to, just like a Paul Frank cafe or something like that, they're really, really intricate. And I think it's a lot of it is driven by the fact that we live on our phones and we want to take pictures of everything. And yeah, but I think it's just like a really fascinating way to gain like brand awareness and just create a space where like people can just have a good like place to hang out that feels like an experience while connecting with a brand without like it being just about the brand. So yeah, I think that's a really cool white space that maybe North America hasn't quite tapped into or isn't as familiar with on the like regular brand level.
I think those like bank cafes, they like
Right.
almost went away, but they're like kind of going strong. I think that's maybe an example of that working fairly well. Is just
Yeah, it's just like it's not like cool pop-ups aren't reserved for like the Gucci's and the Hermes of the world. Like I think any brand could do something really fun and cool if they wanted to.
And that kind of relates to what Gia was mentioning, right? Like in real life, pop-up experiences, getting, from the screen to out in the wild and meeting people and experiencing things in ways you wouldn't experience in the digital world.
I think
Yeah.
another thing is like silliness. and fun. Like I think before this, there was a very like serious, like brand purpose, like Patagonia vibe, and like very mission driven and for good. And yes, that is important. But now I think everyone is so like overwhelmed with the state of the world that we're just kind of looking for something fun and silly and not that serious. So like Pingu is like a super fun and silly brand. Duolingo is very capitalized on that unhinged vibe. And even like the whole brat era
Mm.
was all about, you know, just letting go. Um, yeah, we want to see brands have fun.
We are going, unless there's any other white space comments, I could talk about, it's like it's one of my favorite topics. Let's go to our last question, it's our closing question, and for everyone to chime in a thought. So it used to be all about the BRICS countries, Brazil, Russia, China, India, South Africa, because of the rising middle class and sheer size of the population. What's the next big market people should be paying attention to?
My take is Middle East. I think there is a very, very booming market there, for brands, businesses, job opportunities. So yeah, across the Middle East, I think is one to keep an eye on over the next couple of years.
I do feel like I see more friends that have gone to Qatar or they've gone to UAE. So for sure. Ingrid.
But yeah, I agree that there's a lot of purchasing power in the Middle East for sure. And that there are people there that have money and they want to spend it. I'd say a lot of Africa, Kenya, Ghana, Tanzania, I think in the next 15 years will really explode. That the average age is like 19. They're slowly getting educated. Their population will, blossom. They're having babies, which is a big thing in the world. That the rest of the world is not really having babies anymore. Asia has a huge issue with that. A lot of Europe. And so we have an aging demographic in those places. And so I think Africa definitely is a place to watch, and Kenya being the first stop.
Brian or Gia, any thoughts on the next big emerging market?
Yeah, my pick was Southeast Asia. I feel like yeah, just in terms of the creators that are coming out of there, I feel like there's been kind of a boom, especially because of TikTok, and yeah, just seeing kind of the content that they're putting out, and then also just I guess seeing other countries, brands kind of moving towards that space as well. Like I'm thinking a lot of K-pop is now expanding specifically towards Southeast Asia as well. So yeah, just it seems like a very big opportunity there.
I also want to honor Bryant's lighting right now. It's A+. It is just coming in soft. So good.
Thank you. The sun is setting. Well, my apartment faces west, so the sun sets right into my apartment.
Let me close with a question in the chat.
Yeah, there's a
Go
question
ahead.
just popped up from Danny, and it's, is there a platform that developing brands should begin with when entering the US or Asia, such as an entrance marketing company of any sorts? Is there a platform that brands should begin to look for when entering, let's say, entering the US?
Maybe social media platform, do you think?
In terms of social media, I feel like um, Instagram is always a staple. I feel like that's kind of like the new website. Like if you don't have one, then you look kind of shady. Um, but I think still like in terms of just like popularity, especially with Gen Z, TikTok is so vital for just getting your name out there, and that opportunity is definitely just so big on that platform to kind of spread your name and kind of your messaging out there. So I think those would be the two that I would recommend for the US.
Terrific.
Wow, we're at 70 minutes. Fascinating discussion. Special thanks to our four panelists, Ingrid, Gia, Bryant, Celine, Professor Pack. Thank you for allowing us to do our 4th or 5th annual global marketing webinar with you and your support.
Great. Andy and Matt, thank you so much for moderating such a stimulating and enlightening panel discussion. After listening to your conversation, then it seems like finding a sweet spot or an optimal balance between global integration and local adaptation in your branding strategy, it seems to be a key to success, whether they're American companies looking for business opportunities in Asia or Asian companies expanding their businesses to the US. We have a few minutes left, so if you do not mind that, I'd like to ask the final question to all of you. So would you please name a few Asian companies whose branding strategy have been quite successful in the US market? And maybe also that any US companies come to your mind who's been quite successful because of their very successful branding strategy in Asian market. So either way would be fine. Other than 98 or
Sure, I'll start. Yeah. I'm excited to see Netflix continue to grow in Asia. I think they've, continued to invest in Asia. They have this really, creative atmosphere with their employees and how they come up with content. And I just, read a recent article how they're really putting a lot of money into all over Asia. And
Mhm.
so, I think that they've done it so well. They've done it well up until now. And I think they'll continue to do well. So, yes, that's an American company entering Asia. And if I had to think of an Asian company entering the US, I'm a little biased towards Korea since I was just there in Seoul last summer with you, Dr. Pak. Um, I think Hyundai, is an amazing company that, again, will continue to do well. They've really are grabbing onto not just hybrid, but hydrogen cars. And and they're, the the reputation of their brand in the US, I think, is only going to continue to improve. So yeah, I'd say Hyundai is a great one.
Anybody from our alumni? No? Celine, you want to
I
say?
was gonna say automotive, yes, for sure. I think there's gonna be, I think this is more of an emerging thing. I think there'll be a push for Chinese brand EVs coming to the US. I know BYD is basically the fleet vehicle for most of LA Dash buses.
Mhm.
I think it'll just keep going on a consumer level.
Mhm.
Yeah, so that would probably be my top pick. Um,
Okay.
Also, I know there's like controversy around this, but like Temu and Shein, fast fashion is its own debate and debacle, but I think it's really infiltrated a lot
Oh,
of, fashion and like TikTok internet shopping culture here.
okay. Great. I'd like to thank Ingrid, my department colleague, for joining the webinar and sharing your perspectives about these important issues. And special thanks, of course, goes to LMU alumni, Celine, Brian, and Gia, for sharing your experiences and insights with us today about this very important topic. Finally, I'd like to thank all of you who joined the webinar today. I know some of you have joined this webinar from different time zones, so I hope that you have enjoyed the program. Before you leave this webinar, I really appreciate it if you could complete a short, brief survey about this webinar. So thank you so much, everyone, and hopefully I'll see you again at our next webinar. Thanks. Thank you, everyone.